Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss King Arthur, starring Clive Owen, Keira Knightley, Ioan Gruffudd, Stellan Skarsgård, Stephen Delaney, Ray Winstone, Hugh Dancy, and Til Schweiger, and directed by Antoine Fuqua. Now, I remember going to theaters for this, and my opinion of it, like I brought up with Indiana Jones, another Ray Winstone film of the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's going to be the same as this one. Let's see how we go with this one. In 452 AD, we meet a young Lancelot and his sister, whom I think is a young Guinevere, whom I'm guessing are brother and sister, but I could be wrong about that, as I don't get their relationship at the beginning, or who these characters are for that matter. 15 years later, we meet Arthur, played by Clive Owen, along with Bors, played by Ray Winstone, welcome back from Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Merlin, played by Stephen Delaney, and an adult Lancelot, played by Ioan Gruffudd, as well as Tristan, played by Mads Mikkelsen, before he was ever famous. Gawain, I think I said that wrong, my fault, played by Joel Edgerton. Galahad, played by Hugh Dancy, and Dagonet, played by Ray Stevenson, fight over Roman Britain. And do I know these characters? Not very well. And do I care about this movie? I don't understand it, but no. And when they're done fighting, they find a man named Bishop, and I don't understand this movie nor its plot, while director Antoine Fuqua does a bad job at making this look historical and not making the audience know these characters whatsoever. When they get home, they get to their families as well as having dinner with Bishop, and he talks with Arthur, telling them they have to go back to war, as the men don't want to have to, but don't have a choice, but to do so. And all of this is any of this making sense? Not really. Lancelot asks Arthur if he could cremate him instead of burying him if he does die, while we're introduced to the bad guy named Cerdic, played by Stellan Skarsgård, killing people, telling someone if they want to challenge him. They have a sword in his hand, and he learns about Arthur, and this villain is absolutely pretentious. Arthur and the troops leave for battle, and they're suddenly being tracked by wolves everywhere, and they get attacked by the wolves. And the cinematography in this movie, as well as the whole movie, looked absolutely terrible, as this felt like a rush job after Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl, as that was a bigger hit than and is a better movie than this movie, I'll say, as this doesn't feel epic as Pirates of the Caribbean. They try to pick up someone who refuses to leave his home with his son while a man is being punished and disobeying Marius and Arthur, warning about a war coming towards them. And this dialogue is absolutely horrible, and it is corny as hell, and the script is poorly written. Lancelot kills a man while in a tunnel with Arthur and others, and they find Guinevere, played by Keira Knightley, and break her out of prison, and the ruler acts like a real jackass about freeing the prisoners, and this feels stupid, as I'm getting bored out of my freaking mind. Arthur cures Guinevere's fingers, which look desperately painful, and as far as I'm concerned, this movie feels desperate to be a good movie, but unfortunately it's not, as this is the most bored I've been in any of his films. Cerdic burns a village down, and do I care about this? Absolutely not. As a villain, Skarsgård has done better villains than in this movie. Meanwhile, Guinevere chats with Arthur and gets on his skin, and she got in mine as well. And I was like, oh God, make her stop talking, as she was getting on my nerves. And this scene is something answers my question at this point. Guinevere and Lancelot are not brother and sister, as they look like they never seen each other before and in their lives, as that kind of helped, but not really for the beginning, I'll say. Guinevere helps a family survive an ambush while Arthur and others come in to save the day, and does that work for me? Not at all. And Arthur and his men ride in the snow while they get help from the people, and they're saved, and they get the people they save some weapons, while the enemy shoots an arrow at them, and a couple of Arthur's men shoot two of them and get a couple of enemies down. It reminded me, why should I care at all, as I wanted to know right off the bat? Arthur falls back and prepares for combat while breaking the ice to let the enemy drown as the ice is breaking, and I lost it at this point, and it begins to lose me. Bishop finally frees Arthur and his army from the Roman Empire, and Guinevere talks with Arthur, as I'm checked out of this movie at this point, as it's absolutely boring. An army of enemies come to the wall and prepared for battle, and Arthur tries to get out of the battle while Lancelot wants him to stick around, but he walks around, and next thing you know, Guinevere kisses Arthur before combat. It reminded me, why the hell is this movie called King Arthur? As it has nothing to do with the story I grew up with as a kid. And importantly, why is there a sex scene at this point before a battle scene is beyond me? Arthur decides to lead the battle against the enemy within Cerdic, seeing Arthur is about to get started on the battle, which I will talk about in the next subject. Arthur confronts Cerdic and chats with him about what Arthur fights for, and he decides he's a man worth killing, and everyone prepares for a battle as Arthur makes a speech to become free from the madness, and Cerdic and the fight begins with Guinevere and others shooting arrows at the enemy, and Arthur charges to kill some of the bad guys as the bad guys gain up and enter the wall as it's an ambush, and they charge at the brave knights, and the bad guys are in for a trap that is Guinevere's group of arrows, and they charge against the bad guys, and the bad guys fire some fireballs at the army while Arthur charges at Cerdic, and we have a battle that appears to be endless, and as that was driving me crazy, as it ends with Lancelot dead, which I kind of predicted, with a very terrible piece of dramatic score, and the Arthur versus Cerdic battle did feel choreographed in a bad way, as Arthur wins by stabbing Cerdic in the stomach, and that kills him and screams at the heavens for Lancelot's dead, and cremates Lancelot and becomes King Arthur and marries Guinevere, which has nothing to do with the story I was told as a kid, and this climax felt bloated and absolutely pointless. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 1.8 out of 10. I don't quite know these characters, as director Antoine Fuqua does a bad job at making me get to know these characters, as the villain is pretentious and making this movie historical, and I just don't understand this plot, as this was a hard movie to get through, as it makes no sense whatsoever. It's not as epic as Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl, as the dialogue is corny as hell, and the dialogue is absolutely horrible, and the script is poorly written. This is the most boring of director Antoine Fuqua's films, as I was bored out of my mind. I can't believe this was a rush job after Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, as it's desperate to try to be a good movie, which is not for that reason, and it's a strong non-recommendation. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Shooter, and until then, all hail King Arthur, all hail the king.